Avengers Endgame is here! It is the culmination of 21 movies so far in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
This superhero franchise started with Iron Man all the way back in 2008.
And all the movies since then are at least a little bit connected.
That's a lot of movies to catch up on.
Avengers assemble!
So yeah, it all starts with the first Iron Man movie. Robert Downey Jr. is basically playing himself. He's a knight in shining armor, he cracks wise, he's fighting Jeff Bridges, there's industrial sabotage. The Avengers movies wouldn't have happened without the first Iron Man because Nick Fury, played by Samuel L. Jackson, shows up at the end and is like, hey Tony Stark, you're not the only superhero in town. The Hulk first smashes in The Incredible Hulk. It's not the 2003 movie called Hulk, we do not talk about that. Edward Norton is playing Bruce Banner. He's later replaced by Mark Ruffalo, who is a much better Bruce Banner. Bruce is hiding out in Brazil. He's like bottling soda pop or something. There's some smashing, there's some mayhem. At the end of the movie, Tony Stark shows up and he's like, hey Bruce, wanna join the Avengers? Then there's Iron Man 2. Mickey Rourke is there, he has whips, it's all right. The key things to keep in mind are that Black Widow, played by Scarlett Johansson, appears for the first time in a very bad wig, but very good karate moves. And then Don Cheadle replaces Terrence Howard as Rhodey from the first Iron Man movie, and he puts on a suit of armor and becomes War Machine and starts fighting bad guys in the air with rockets alongside Tony Stark.
The first Thor movie, it is important for two reasons. Chris Hemsworth, AKA the hottest Hemsworth, and we meet a lot of people who are gonna come up later. Thor's dad, Odin, is mad at him. He casts him down to earth, takes away his powers. He throws his hammer down there with him. Thor can't pick it up at first, but by the end of the movie, he's got his powers back. He can pick up the hammer, and he's in love with Jane Foster, a scientist, and we meet a ton of people. We'll see them later. They're all gonna help in his journey. It's awesome.
So then we have the very literally and very accurately named Captain America, the First Avenger. It's set in the 1940s during World War II. You have Steve Rogers, played by Chris Evans, who's very, very skinny, and then becomes a super soldier, which means he becomes very, very buff. And he's fighting Nazis with his best friend Bucky Barnes, and those Nazis include the Red Skull, who's got that shiny blue box called the Tesseract. They're doing Nazi stuff with it, but it's secretly the Space Stone, which is secretly an Infinity Stone, and those become quite important later.
The first Avengers movie is just called The Avengers, and it brings together all of the heroes that we've seen before, and they all end up fighting an alien invasion by something called the Chitauri.
And then the Iron Man trilogy comes to a close with Iron Man 3, aka the one with Gwyneth Paltrow in a suit of armor. Nothing important happens, and you don't ever need to think about it again.
Thor, The Dark World. It is not a good movie, but it does have the Reality Stone, which will become important later. That's pretty much all you need to know.
A couple important things happen in Captain America the Winter Soldier. First of all, Bucky Barnes comes back, but now he's a brainwashed murder machine. Second of all, Sam Wilson, aka the Falcon, shows up. He's Captain America's new BFF, and he has rocket-powered bird wings, which is really rock and roll. And then Captain America and Black Widow team up and go on like a solo spy adventure, and they fight evil Robert Redford, who's working with Hydra, which is like the Marvel Universe's secret terrorist organization. It's actually kind of my favorite Marvel movie.
Guardians of the Galaxy. We are out in space. The Guardians are becoming a team, and we're meeting them. Star-Lord, Gamora, Drax, Groot, the Raccoon. The other thing that happens is the Power Stone is introduced, and that is really important.
The second Avengers movie is called Avengers Age of Ultron. Dr. Bruce Banner, also known as the Hulk, and Tony Stark, also known as Iron Man, try to create this thing called Ultron. It goes crazy. It tries to destroy humanity and ends up taking out an entire country. It's really bad. Ultimately, the Avengers win. In Ant-Man, a small-time criminal named Scott Lang steals an experimental suit that allows him to shrink down to the size of an ant. It's kind of a lightweight film, but it looks like Scott Lang is going to be an important part of Avengers Endgame.
Captain America Civil War, super crucial. Captain America and Iron Man are fighting like mommy and daddy. They split up. Half of the Avengers go with Captain America, half of the Avengers go with Iron Man. Most importantly though, Black Panther and Spider-Man show up for the first time.
Doctor Strange, two things to know. He has a really cool cape, and the Time Stone is introduced. Guardians of the Galaxy 2, we find out that Star-Lord is part God. He makes the decision to give up that part of himself, which seems like a dumb move as we're heading into this epic battle against Thanos. The other important thing to know is that Gamora's sister Nebula, who has been a villain up to now, starts to show her heroic side, and that could be very important in Endgame.
In Spider-Man Homecoming, we get an entire movie about Spider-Man, who we first saw in Captain America Civil War. It's one of my personal favorites of the films. It's kind of lower stakes, but introduces Tom Holland as Spider-Man, and he is absolutely wonderful.
Thor, Ragnarok. So much is going on. It's so good. Thor ends up in space. He meets up with the Hulk, who we have not seen since the Age of Ultron. We didn't know what happened to him. Becomes kind of a buddy movie. Thor loses an eye. He loses his hammer. It's smashed by his sister Hela, played by Cate Blanchett, who's totally wasted. I wish she'd been in Dark World. By the end of the movie, Thor and the Hulk are hooking up with the Guardians of the Galaxy. They're all heading back to Avenge.
In Black Panther, the action switches to the technologically advanced nation of Wakanda, and the king of that nation, T'Challa, is also the Black Panther, and he ends up fighting a guy named Eric Killmonger who wants to contest T'Challa's claim on the throne. Black Panther ultimately wins. In the third Avengers movie, which is also called Avengers Infinity War, we find out that the Mad Titan Thanos is the big bad guy behind a lot of what's been going wrong in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And all of the heroes come together and fight him, including people like Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. And at the end of that movie, they lose huge. In Ant-Man and the Wasp, Scott Lang, aka the Ant-Man, is under house arrest following the events of Captain America Civil War. He is sprung out of his home by Hank Pym, the guy who invented the Ant-Man suit, and his daughter Hope. And Hope becomes the Wasp. They have some adventures, but the important part is, at the end of that movie, Scott Lang is trapped in the microverse. This is going to become important in Avengers Endgame.
Captain Marvel, we saw Nick Fury put out a distress call for her at the end of Infinity Wars, and in this origin story, we find out why. She's a total badass. Also, she has a cat who just might help save the world.
And that brings us to Avengers Endgame. Find our review of the movie and more Avengers goodies at awesome360.com. Whew, that was a lot.